Good morning. Are you guys all here? Can you guys hear me? There's way too many cameras up front, way too many. So we want to talk about something called digital, right? And it is the Finance Indaba, and it's October already. So almost everything that you want to know about digital, you've probably heard today. But I guess the big question that we want to talk about is, what does it all mean? So we've got some slides up, and I'll ask for that to come up in a second if it can. So one of the key things to remember, it's actually pretty tough out there right now. Do you guys recognize it's tough? How do we know it's tough? We know it's tough when the IMF reduces our forecast for growth from 0.7 to 0.6. That happened this week. The global economic output for next year has dropped by 1%. That's happening right now. Our unemployment in South Africa is north of 27.7%. So it's tough out there. And here we are at Finance Indaba asking, what do we do differently? What's changing around us? Now, the reality is that for the last few weeks, you've been hearing about something called the robots. And the robots are coming. The robots are coming, and they'll be taking over. We've heard about Terminator 3 and is Skynet almost upon us? And what I thought I'd do today is help us to demystify that. Help us to understand practically what is going to happen this year, going into next year, and then what do we start to do? And in some form or the other, the reason why you're at this conference today and yesterday was to understand the future of the finance function and what it means for you and your organization. So at the very minimum, we're going to try and demystify that. So the robots are in fact coming, but they're coming out of necessity. Now, when you think about Skynet and think about these robots walking around and taking your jobs, that probably isn't true for right now. In fact, there's an overused phrase that goes by the term artificial intelligence, right? And the question is artificial intelligence really going to take over all our jobs right now? And what does it mean for us? There's a couple truths to be told. If your job entails a process, if it entails rules and algorithms, if you could write it down on a piece of paper, and if you follow that process, rule, or algorithm more than once, chances are that job is prone to automation, right? In fact, by the year 2030, almost half of all currently known jobs will cease to exist. That's the reality. But why will it cease to exist? In the current context of our macroeconomics, of the political environment, of the scarcity of jobs, we as organizations will have to become more efficient and more effective. Not a single one of our organizations has excess CapEx or OpEx lying around. We've got to become more efficient. So there are certain things that we do as organizations that we're going to have to rethink about. We're going to have to ask, how do I do it better? Now, the reality is that you don't want to be scared about AI. AI is going to help us as an industry. While we find that jobs will be offset with new age jobs, there are things you hear about today, like data scientists, like creative designers or design thinking, that didn't exist 5 years ago. That's now mainstream. But the question is, what does it mean for us as finance professionals? Is there something going to change in our very fabric to make us relevant? So that's important. Now, a couple of things worth noting about artificial intelligence before we move forward to what do you do about it. Artificial intelligence has started already in South Africa in two basic forms. The first form is what we call robotic process automation. Earlier, I spoke about rules and processes that are being automated and repeatable. Your organization, whether you're a bank or a retailer or a large government entity, if you haven't started to use software to automate this, you're actually missing a trick. Why is it important for us? Your very survival as an organization to attain your salary, to attain your bonus, requires your business to be more efficient and more effective. Robots, or software robots specifically, are able to work 24/7, 365. They don't take sick leave, they don't get emotional, and they're prepared to work through the night. When we start to think about how that works, you ask the question, if Lee's talking about almost half the jobs being taken out over the next many years, what jobs will remain and what does it mean? In the 50% that remain, it's a very special kind of attributes. Number one, technology is not ready to be creative and socially intelligent. Technology is not going to be orchestrators of outcomes. And as we go forward, you're going to find that more and more what we do has got to change. Okay? You guys getting it? So, is there an opportunity, or we're going to be quite depressed about this thing called digital? Is there a future for us as a country and as an organization, and what do we start to do about it? So, the future is actually brighter than you think. The picture up on the screen is not ECT, electroconvulsive therapy. It's actually what our future looks like in some form, right? We're going to think about a future where we as humans coexist with technology, and I'm hoping to share with you a few nuggets of some of the things I expect us to start thinking about. But like this young man, who's clearly an overachiever, he's got a vision of relevance. The question is, how do we start to drive our relevance as individuals? So as opposed to spending a lot of time telling you about intelligence and robots and drones, these things are real and those things are happening. For example, we talk about drones and we ask ourselves, drones are really cool and I can go to the nearest tech shop and buy a drone. Is it relevant for my organization, and what could I do with it? If you weren't aware, an organization called Zipline released a drone in Rwanda that's now able to deliver blood to the scene of an accident without a human. That's happening right now. Where did the innovation come from? It actually came from Silicon Valley. So the North Americans are creating innovations for our market. But we're the ones that are sitting with these problems, and the context within which we sit, we can start to solve new problems. Suddenly you can deliver blood to the scene of an accident. In the UAE right now, a concept called Velocopter is going to be able to move people between two places without a human driver. How efficient would that be in a crowded economy to move between places and not to stress about traffic? I guess the point I'll make more and more is that there are things that humans are better suited to, which is our higher value thinking, rather than the basic tasks that are becoming mundane and boring. Unless you have a really fancy car, having a car and being stuck in traffic, but in Pretoria and Joburg is not the most exciting thing. So, Africa has, in fact, shifted into focus. We as consultants and strategists start to think about something called the multipolar world. And what the multipolar world talks about is a shift of power from the west to the east and from the north to the south. If I was here 5 years ago and I asked you, tell me who's the biggest global power, you'd all say the exact same thing, the United States of America. If I asked you today, you'd probably say, I'm actually not sure. Can I go chat to a friend or two? Because when you think about the world powers, you're starting to think, surely China must feature somewhere. Surely India must feature somewhere. And that's the reality. The power has shifted across the equator and between the north and the southern hemisphere. Now, we are part of the BRICS set of countries, right? And you ask yourself, Lee, it's quite tough in South Africa, but is that a mainstay problem? Yes, South Africa's current GDP growth is forecasted between 0.6 and 0.7 for this year, but the continent we live in over the next few years is forecasted to grow at between 4 to 6%. Just East Africa, where I have a business in Kenya, for example, we're forecasting that economy to grow at 8% between 2017 and 2020. Now, that sounds okay, but is it impressive? The United States in the same time period is only forecasted to grow 2.2% at a GDP level, right? The population growth in the world is going to happen in Africa, right? The most population, Asia pans out, Africa keeps to grow. So that's another indicator that there will be activity, there'll be the evolution of the workforce. In terms of the highest growing economies over the next many years, 5 of the top 10 don't come from China, don't come from Europe, they come from Africa, Ethiopia, the DRC. So we sitting in the room are sitting on the prime spot of opportunity. We probably haven't realized this because we're in Africa, right? Shouldn't it be the North Americans or the Chinese or the Indians? But all the indicators say that we are poised for high levels of growth from a GDP perspective. We are poised for high levels of growth from a population perspective. We are poised for a high level of growth in terms of problems that seed opportunities that are worth solving. Who would have thought last year, not 5 years ago, who would have thought last year that at the scene of an accident, a drone could deliver critical blood supplies? That's happening today. That's your reality. So how do we start to open up our digital future, and what are some of the opportunities? Now, I could talk about organizations, and I could talk about you individually. So let's try and mix it up. Because clearly, if we're going to realize our digital future, and you aren't going to be in the 47% of those that become irrelevant in the years ahead, what are you going to start to do differently? Number one, remember that what will always beat how. So let me understand this, right? We spend a lot of time thinking about what we do behind our desk. If your job is to polish a bowling ball, you polish it as best as you can. You make the best slides possible. You worry about whether the RGB color of red on your PowerPoint deck to the CEO is the most important thing. The reality is it doesn't really matter. Because in the world we live in right now, when you have this high level of unemployment, your employer, your organization is looking for value in a term that they understand. It's going to be about revenue. It's going to be about growth. It's going to be about profitability. It's never, ever going to be about more slides and more spreadsheets, right? So it's a very important concept to understand, not just how I do my job, but how what I do contributes to the bigger objective of the organization. Now, if this is confusing, it's quite simple to stop and ask the question, what is the very purpose of your organization? What are you trying to achieve? And if you've got that purpose locked down, if your purpose is to make ice cream, then focus on ice cream. Because if you're selling something on the side, it detracts from your focus. And given the organization you work in right now and the economy we're in right now, are we really able to do way too many things? So think about what is it you do. Simon Sinek, who I'm a massive fan of, talks about purpose. And he always says, why before what before how, right? No one cares how we do it. And why is that important? As you think about automation and artificial intelligence, you now have options as an organization. There are things that you do right now that you aren't the best at doing, if only you were honest with yourselves, right? You have some folk that start from scratch every single time trying to build the very best service. For example, payroll, right? Some of you still do payroll manually, using paper or using your own system, and everyone else is using payroll as a service from Sage VIP Payroll or some other organization. Is payroll an important thing in your organization? Not really. Unless you're in the payroll business, payroll is not your core function. So ask yourself, what is it you do every day? What is the value you add? If the answer you come up with is to come up with really cool slides, that is not what you do. You haven't found your purpose. And equally so in your organization, what is the organizational purpose? If that purpose isn't driving your every single action, then you're doing the wrong thing. The technology is there, the connectivity is there, what do you start to do? The next concept I want to share is called sharing is the new owning. We are very possessive as people. We always talk about organizational failures, and we ask ourselves, why do organizations fail? We ask ourselves, is it because they haven't innovated enough? The reality is that we spend a lot of time building walls around us, between countries, between organizations. In fact, when's the last time you spoke to your colleague in another part of your business? When was the last time that finance spoke to IT? And IT keeps saying, you don't speak my language, I'm not going to talk to you. You're always wanting more costs taken out. Do you actually understand? But as we go forward, we need to get used to the concept of sharing and not actually owning, right? Why buy when you could lease, right? Why buy a helicopter if you could rent it for an hour, right? We need to get over that. In the current economy, in the current state of where we are, we need to get across the sharing mentality. Now, you may say, Lee, that sounds okay, but who do I trust? Trust has become something that's actually a lot more transparent and a lot of SLAs that go with it. Think about the global partnerships that exist. An organization like Netflix that uses content to send to your house, they don't own the data center that hosts all the data. That's done by Amazon, right? They specialize in creating the best movies and series like House of Cards for you. they've realized if they don't share the cake and open up the walls of collaboration, they're going to try and do everything. So when you think about what versus how, ask yourself, when you think about the hows that you're really bad at doing, who could share that pie with you? Who could you tap into? And take the emotion out of it. Give yourself options. Now, if you're in procurement, you'd say, Lee, I don't want to hold myself to someone that hasn't done this before, and that's okay. The way we're going to think about this is that it's a bigger pie. If we solve for the collective good, we all do better. Not just us as an organization or as an individual. We solve that 27.7% unemployment problem. We take the entrepreneur from the township that wants to be pulled up and it has the idea, but you refuse to use the idea because it's his idea or her idea. Why can't we build on what's out there already? The problem is us. The problem is not the technology. It isn't even your organization. It starts with me. Am I prepared to let down the guard and say, I'm wrong, I don't know how? Can you show me? The next concept I want to talk about is connectivity. The entire notion of what separated us for so long has now put us together once again. Africa's been a place that's always been separated in many ways by distance in terms of facilities. If you wanted to go to a hospital, it could take you 4 hours and 3 taxis, and you'd have to go over 2 different rivers, for example. Or if you wanted to travel, that has changed. But now we have connectivity. Since 2010, we now have a redundant submarine fiber cable around Africa that gives us options. Suddenly, the distance that kept us apart has now put us together, if only we think in new ways. For example, if I want to have a meeting with any one of you, I could call you to my office. I now work for a global organization. When we have a meeting, we all jump onto Skype or a telephone call, or you could FaceTime, or do something like that. So the connectivity that you complained about as an organization, that you said, Lee, the distance keeps me apart, it isn't a requirement anymore. Now, let's go back to what versus how for a second. If what versus how told us that we weren't good at everything, and to deliver on our purpose as an organization, we're to think about something differently, let me tell you that connectivity isn't your problem anymore. Connectivity that holds us together is actually there. Once again, are we prepared to explore new ways of working? Are we prepared to say, I don't need to see Lee to know that he's working. What if Lee wore short pants today for my keynote address? Would you take me as seriously? Does it really matter how one looks, where you are, where you stay? Do you care? This is what we call a virtual marketplace. The virtual marketplace is now enabled by a world that's connected. How connected is the world? We're talking about over 1 trillion sensors that link to objects all around us being connected over the next 15 years. What does that mean practically? Every phone, every desk, every computer, your fridge is all starting to communicate. And all that data, all that connectivity asks the question, if you're going to start to share, if you're going to start to collaborate, is it possible? And the answer is possible. When is it possible? It's possible right now. The next one, competition does not need to be a competitor. Now, one of the things you're going to hear about at this conference, you heard about it yesterday, and for sure you'll hear about it today, is the fintechs. I had the privilege of doing a keynote address and a panel yesterday at another event, and I had on the panel a 25-year-old that ran a company called Pineapple, right? So now, what is Pineapple? And it was a decentralized insurer. So this individual said, we have challenged the very notion of insurance. Insurers think about a certain way, and if they don't pay out claims, the money goes onto the bottom line. Pineapple was started by 3 different individuals with different backgrounds that came together, and they asked the question, could we disrupt insurance? Could we take away the big walls and demystify what insurance was? What if insurance was the way Mohammed Yunus set up the Grameen Bank in Bangladesh years ago? Or what if insurance worked the way a stokvel worked in our community? What if we got to see what our premium contributed to as part of that ecosystem? Now, one of the challenges for us as large organizations, we've always done what we've done the way we've always done it. What if there was a new way? What if I came to your organization today and said, I have found a new way to do something. I found a new way to drive wellness, right? The same way Discovery does vitality. Why are you building a competitor to vitality if vitality or multiply is the very best solution? Could you put it into a box, wrap it up with a ribbon, and call it something else? In the world we live in, we care too much about the how and not about the what. Are you guys getting it? We're going to think about the purpose we drive and how that comes together. Given the number of problems we have as a society, as a continent, and our problems aren't problems about revenue and growth. Our problems are societal in nature. The disparity between the haves and the have-nots is something we've got to solve. And if we all get our collective minds around solving 2 or 3 of the biggest problems in the continent, enabled by our digital future, we'll all benefit, not just as South Africa or as Africa, but as the people, right? There'll be financial inclusion, reaching out and saying, you've never had access to credit, I'll trust you. There's an organization in Africa that I'm working with right now that when you struggle to get prepaid airtime to make a call, they're starting to loan you prepaid airtime in advance of you actually having the money. They found a smart way to figure out whether, without having a financial background or having bank accounts, whether they could trust certain behaviors about you as an individual to lend you your next 7 rand for airtime in the hope that you'll pay it back to them at the next time. And when you don't, you probably won't get a 7 rand the time after. So we're now moving into a place when digital comes together, connectivity happens. And when connectivity happens, it starts to do something really powerful. It starts to release our humanity, right? It tells us to forget about the stuff we shouldn't care about. Do we really care about what color the server is in the room downstairs? Or what is the brand of your payroll system? Or where you physically sit? We care about something greater. So in some regard, our digital future is creating our humanity. It's allowing us as humans to do what we do really well, which is be social beings and creative beings and use the intelligence that technology can't. So when you think about competition, whether it's competition at your peer level or a disruptor that will come in with short pants and sandals and has a long big beard, which seems to be a big trend right now, right? What are you going to do about it? Will you say no because of how I look? Or will you say yes to opportunity and yes to exploring how that could potentially add value to you? And finally, we've got to talk about this. What is the culture of your new organization? We spend a lot of time talking about our strategy. We spend a lot of time building the best PowerPoint deck and binding it over 300 pages and laminating it up and putting it up on walls. The reality is that for us to survive, culture will beat strategy. The way we behave, the way we collaborate, the way we treat each other as humans, starting today, allows us to exist in a new way. So think of the culture your organization has. Think about your culture, your behavior towards other people. Are you putting up walls for collaboration? If you know that your colleague is struggling, why don't you go out of your way to pull him up and lend a hand and find a way to drive collective value? Now, a key part of how we think about strategy is that strategy is only as good as the people that live it, as the energy that goes behind that. And in a place like South Africa, or in a place like Africa, where we've been told the economy is growing too slowly, politics isn't as stable as we'd like, the services we have are disparate. You know, the future is here, but it's unequally distributed. We know those things. What's the one thing I can tell you today that beats all of that? It starts with you. What culture will you bring to work tomorrow or on Monday? What will you do differently to open up the path to collaborate, to solve a bigger problem? It isn't about the spreadsheet. It isn't about the PowerPoint. It's got to be something more than that. So with that, I hope you have a great second day, and welcome to our Finance Indaba conference. Thank you.
I think the Finance Indaba is a wonderful platform for all the professionals. Clearly the entire industry is being disrupted in the age of digital, and I love the fact that the conversations are happening right now about where this could go to, and for every professional they can start to ask themselves two questions. One, how do I become individually relevant? And secondly, how do I help my organization as a CFO or as a finance professional navigate this tough journey? I'm really excited about the future of finance. I think personally that the CFO has a very key role to play in navigating our future organizations. For one, they have a very good view of the financial part of the organization, and as they start to become relevant in terms of their knowledge, they can start to advise not just the CEO but their broader organizations about the directions that they take. Given the history of CFOs and their financial role, as we go forward to a much more agile organization, I think CFOs are best positioned to guide us into a safe and a managed profile from a digital world perspective. Some of the key things that we can do as a South African nation to drive our own future is to start to own the problems that we have in front of us. Africa is a place of potential at an individual level. As we start to educate ourselves about the key problems that we have, when we start to come together as one country, as one organization, and start to break the silos that keep us apart, then we'll start to be more relevant. And as we work to solve collective problems, we'll see a greater good, not just for ourselves as individuals and for our organizations, but for our country as a whole.